Laura, do you have any idea when he possibly is going to come in?
I'm waiting to hear back from him. Just give me 1 minute.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I would ask a stupid question, but unfortunately, if we're talking while he arrives, I might low key crash out. So I apologize for the uncomfortable silence, but it will only be a moment longer. Hopefully, he does pull up on time. I apologize that he hasn't. But thank you guys for being so patient.
As I always say, keep calm and skibbity on.
With the center staffer here is crazy to say, Jinya.
Sorry, y'all. Just give me 1 minute. I'm trying to get in touch with our scheduling team here.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate it.
He'll be on in a few minutes now. He's jumping on. Thanks all for your patience.
Thank you, Laura. Hi, Sanders. Oh my God.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing
My
well.
name,
Sorry I'm a little late.
no, it's so good. So hi, my name's Ankita Jaykumar. I'm the High School Democrats of America AANHPI Caucus Chair. Me and my team, Jinya Liu, my Vice Chair, and our co-events director, Achutan Rogeshri, are so excited to have you here today. The three of us will be probably co-hosting this throughout the entire evening. And we're just so honored that you decided to come and spend like an hour with us. I'm going to quickly, like, I guess, do a quick introduction for you,
Sure.
ask you to possibly talk a little bit about yourself, and then Achutan will take it from there. All right. So, hi, everyone. Welcome to the High School Democrats of America AANHPI Caucus Summit. This is our first or second ever, I'm not sure, the details are a bit fuzzy, but it is one of our first virtual summits in years. I'm so honored to be able to be the caucus chair that brings that for y'all. And we are so honored to have Senator Andy Kim with us today. So, Senator Andy Kim is a lifelong public servant, proud to represent New Jersey, where he grew up, and that's given him a family the chance at the American dream, and as well as his job in the United States Senate. So before being elected, unfortunately, Senator Kim represented his home community in the U.S. House of Representatives for about 3 terms, representing parts of Burlington, Ocean, Mercer, and Monmouth counties. During that time, he focused on strengthening America's national security and has been an outspoken advocate for New Jersey's entrepreneurs and small business owners. He's also worked to address big challenges during the coronavirus pandemic and between our current status in foreign diplomacy with the Chinese government. And he was also elected to represent New Jersey's 3rd Congressional District. He's also worked as a public servant under both Democrats and Republicans in various federal agencies. And in the United States Senate, he has done an incredible job of representing the AANHPI community as the first Korean American ever elected to the United States Senate and New Jersey's first Asian American senator. I'm so honored to be able to introduce him, and I would love for Senator Andy Kim to talk a little bit about his journey and what has brought him here today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everybody for letting me jump on. And again, I'm sorry I'm a few minutes late. There's been a development over the last hour or so where we saw sort of a mass firing of workers at the National Security Council, where I used to work at the White House. So I've been trying to figure out what in the world is going on at the White House and trying to figure out what comes next. But hey, look, I know we're going to have opportunities to have question and answer. And so, happy to take your questions, have more of a dialogue. But, the main thing I want to just start by saying is, thank you for your interest in politics and governance. Now more than ever, I think it's so important for us to be thinking about service and thinking about, how it is that we can try to make a mark. When I was in high school, I could care less about politics. It was not something that I really thought about or engaged on. I, thought I was going to be, go into science and do that type of work, which my parents probably still to this day wish I had done. But I was a sophomore in college when September 11th happened. And, that day just, especially for those of us in the New Jersey, New York area was just, and the DC area was just so jarring. And, it was something that just kind of like, I don't know, just kind of like reminded me, like, well, not maybe not even reminded me, but like kind of expressed to me how I can't just like live in my bubble and just assume that growing up in a suburb in New Jersey was going to protect me from what's out there. And I just felt like I needed to do something. And so I decided on September 11th, on that day, that I was going to dedicate my life to national security. And so, I went into diplomacy, I went into national security, and I love that work. But again, I never thought that I would go into politics, politics in the way that we understand it. And what I will tell you right now, and I say this with like all love, fully understanding like, the group that I'm talking to, but I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of politics I can't stand. There's a lot of politics that is about just the which, who's winning, who's losing, and like it just like sometimes it feels like it's just like hand-to-hand combat, just like this sense of like power struggle. Like I see it in the Senate, sometimes, you know, I'm told in Congress, like, oh, we don't want to support this type of initiative because it'll give the other party a win, and it's just like, this kind of idea of a tug of war. But what I would just say is that it doesn't have to be that way. And like for me, I try to think about politics as that sense of public service. I try to think about it similar to what I did when I did national security. And when I think about it that way, I think about it in a transformative way. And in particular, I think about it kind of in the line of, how I came into politics, which is and how I came into government, which is about kind of responding to the moment that we live in. You all, the reason I say this is because like you all are grown up in a very difficult and tumultuous period in America. In many ways, it's even much more crazy than the world that I kind of emerged into. September 11th was an incredible tragedy, but it was also this unifying moment for the country. It was something that actually brought us together at that time. Whereas what you all are witnessing and growing into is a time of great divisiveness, where the crises that we face are actually dividing us even further. And so it's a very challenging moment, but I hope you find in that the same type of calling that I felt towards service, towards trying to figure out how you can make a difference and kind of engage. And I know oftentimes it can feel um, sometimes like daunting, even sometimes unwelcoming. When I first ran for Congress, I was told by people like, like they were like, hey, like you seem like a nice kid and all, but there's no way that you can win a, a seat in Congress. I was only 34 years old at the time when I first ran. And I was running in a district that was 85% white, less than 3% Asian. And they told me that there's no way that an Asian American can win a congressional district. That was the demographic of what my district was. Um, but it just, I found that to be so dispiriting, so disrespectful. The idea that I can only appeal to people that look like me or people that identify as Asian Americans. My story is not just a Korean American story or an Asian American story, but is fundamentally an American story. And I have every bit as much right to represent my district or my state in the US Congress, the US Senate, as anybody else. And so, I think that that was something that took some convincing to me too, though. Like there was part of me that felt like I'm a son of immigrants, I'm a public school kid, that I don't belong in these types of jobs. I don't belong in this type of world. That the people in the U.S. Senate or the U.S. Congress are people that whose families have been involved in politics for generations, people whose families understand government, not a son of a nurse and a son of a cancer researcher. That's not what makes for people in politics. So I just share that with you because I understand sometimes this questioning about, what role can I play? But I'll just say not only that you can, if you want to, get engaged in politics, doesn't mean all of you are going to run for office, but you can find your own way. So not only is it possible, but I also hope you see that it's important and necessary. Like we want to have a government that looks a lot more like the rest of America. We want people in government that can bring different perspectives, including the perspectives of the AAPI community, including the perspective of immigrant families, including the perspective of people that don't necessarily think that politics is for them. Politics is not some exclusive club for the well-off and the well-connected. It is not just there for those that already understand. And I think that that's hopefully something we can break down and we can open up and try to get engaged on. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to understand my role to play in the U.S. Senate. It is a deeply humbling experience to be a U.S. Senator. I'm only the 2006th American ever in the history of this country to be a U.S. Senator, and to be the first Korean American ever, the first Asian American ever in the U.S. Senate, from the entire East Coast of America. But I hope that what I can at least do is show people what is possible, but it's up to them to decide what they actually want to do. So I'm happy to have a widespread conversation. Please feel free to ask me anything that you'd like. But I'm grateful for you all being engaged and being interested and understanding that in these difficult times, it's all the more important that we have good people stepping up to get involved. And I look forward to seeing what you all get up to and the incredible work that hopefully you'll do over the coming years. So with that, I'll turn it on back and we can dive on into the questions.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to introduce you. It's a pleasure to hear from you just now. The divisiveness has definitely been a hallmark of current American politics, and it's unfortunate that it has become that way. But I would love to pass it off to Achaban to ask our first question. He's actually a native from Jersey, so really excited about it.
Thanks, Ankita. Hi, Senator Kim. Thank you again for joining us tonight, and it's so nice to meet you. My name's Achatan, and I'm the co-events director for the AANHPI Caucus, and I'm a high school sophomore from Princeton here in New Jersey. So to start off, given that you made history as New Jersey's first AANHPI senator and the country's first Korean American senator, congrats on that, by the way, how does this milestone shape your priorities for AANHPI representation and inclusion at the federal level?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, what I'll be honest with you, like when I first ran for Congress 8 years ago, there were 0 Korean Americans in the U.S. Congress. But I'll be honest, I didn't realize that. And I say that just to say, like, it wasn't because of the milestone that I ran. Same thing with the Senate. I did not run for Senate with the primary purpose of being the first Korean American ever in the U.S. Senate. And I think that that's important. Like, we don't do this simply because we are trying to make a point or simply because we want a barrier to be broken. There needs to be a different type of intentionality in this. And I think this is something where in order for me to be able to express to the people of New Jersey that I'm in it for them, no matter who they are, I think there needs to be that understanding that I represent everybody, even the people that didn't vote for me, right? I represent them all. Now, that being said, like, there is a very clear feeling that I have in the U.S. Senate that, like, certainly, there's a diversity there in terms of what I represent and who I am, my story. Not only because of my race, but also because of my age. I just doubled the number of millennials there on the Dem side. It's not necessarily a body that's like fully representative in that way. But I think for me, how it really starts to connect is there's an understanding of responsibility that comes with understand that it's not just about what I take away from this, but that also what others take away from this. And in particular, and that's why I was happy to chat with all of you, I hope you take away from my win a greater sense of what is possible. Because as I told you, when I was young, I didn't think it was possible for someone like me to be a U.S. Senator. So it was just not even in my cards. But, I got a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, 2 little boys. And like, I want them to have a different understanding of what is possible. You may very well not want to go into politics, but I hope you see that as a choice that you have rather than a limitation that you might have. And that in itself is meaningful. The other thing is our country is going through a lot of divisiveness, as I said, and part of the divisiveness is this question about what role does plurality play in America? What role does our diversity play in America? And there's a growing sense of neo-isolationism politically and globally, but there is also a sense of growing xenophobia as well. This idea that to be American, it means one thing, a certain amount of homogenization, especially towards a particular type of definition. And I just fundamentally reject that. Like I should be able to I should be able to embody my identity as a Korean American and Asian American and not have that dilute or take away from being an American. Being a Korean American does not make me a lesser American. And that was something that I experienced when for instance, when I was working at the State Department, so I was in diplomacy. I had a really tough experience where, despite the fact that I risked my life for this country, working out in Afghanistan and Iraq and elsewhere, I was at some point told that I was now banned from working on issues related to Korea because the State Department didn't trust that if I was working on issues related to my ancestral homeland, they didn't trust that I would represent America's interest well. Basically, what they told me is they didn't think I would be loyal to this country if I was also confronted with being working on issues related to Korea. And I just found that to be so offensive. The idea that somehow I cannot be trusted, somehow I am not American, 100% American. So those are the types of things that I try to engage on. And that's, right now, just yesterday, what was it? Harvard got attacked by the Trump administration saying that they can't have any foreign students attend Harvard. I mean, that's a direct assault upon, this idea of this country being a place for everybody. My dad came to this country as a student, as a graduate student, a foreign student that was coming to America. So those are the types of things that like it's important for us to protect, important for us to look out for. And I feel very strongly about, taking on these issues that we understand are vital, whether it's about immigration or education or healthcare or any number of others. So yes, like, I don't only represent Asian Americans, of course not, but I also do recognize that I have a unique perspective and that I have a voice that I should use to be able to stand up for the Asian American community at a time of growing xenophobia, growing sense of divisiveness and worry about what comes next. So, those are the things I try to stand up for.
Yeah, thank you for that, Senator. Like, I really admire your motivation for wanting to represent everyone. And you mentioned your background in diplomacy and national security. So, another question we have is how can the U.S. build stronger relationships and work more with AANHPI communities to support foreign policy goals without reinforcing like harmful stereotypes like the perpetual foreigner, like you mentioned you encountered?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, a couple of things that I'll say here is that our government just doesn't engage enough with AAPI communities writ large. Like there's just not enough engagement on that front. And I think in part because a lot of folks in politics, they really um, they really don't feel like they need to touch base and engage with API communities. Like I don't necessarily think they feel it so essentially. And that's part in part because like in my 6 years in Congress, six and a half years in Congress, I've seen very few examples where there's been an issue where I've seen a significant outpouring of engagement and pressure from Asian American communities upon members of Congress. If there's an issue when it comes to European nations or Israel or other types of countries, like there's a massive amount of pressure, a massive amount of attention on Capitol Hill, about these, and a lot of diaspora communities in America raising their voice. I just don't see it. So, I think if there's an interest in having political figures pay more attention to the diaspora, to seek their thoughts when it comes to issues related to foreign policy, there needs to be a lot more engagement politically as well. And I think that that's something that I've been encouraging. Like my ancestral homeland being Korea. When Trump was engaging in talks with North Korea in his first term, I reached out to the White House and I said, if you are serious about this, I'm open to engaging with you and working with you and seeing what might happen. I'm willing to move past, partisanship and engage. But they just weren't interested. They could care less about what the Korean community in America felt at the time. Like it was an afterthought. It was like not even something that like crossed their minds that they would need to or should talk to the Korean community here. Like that needs to change, but it's only going to change if that community speaks up. And it's not just them. Like, right now, whether it's issues related to China, India, Pakistan, other things, there's so many critical issues that are happening. I think that that is something that I hope can grow and be stronger on, because it's so important. And especially when there's so much xenophobia, I think it's important for people to see and hear from these communities in the United States, so it doesn't seem so foreign. And then you also don't have, like, I have a colleague of mine in the Senate who is literally trying to ban all people from China from being able to study in the United States and and be able to work here. I mean, there's like, I say that as I'm a Korean American married to a Chinese American. Like this was, the bar my wife's family from being able to be able to live a life here in the United States without constantly looking over their shoulder. Like this is, just something that is really alarming in terms of how it's being talked about. So I do raise that as something that we need to make sure we're engaging on and making sure that our voice is not taken for granted and our voice is not being ignored.
Yeah, thank you for that, Senator Kim. I'd like to ask you more about like your motivations and what you've about your motivations in serving as a senator. So, for example, you famously cleaned the Capitol Rotunda after January 6th, which was a moment that resonated with a lot of young people like us. So, how do you continue to lead with humility and purpose in a political climate that's so deeply polarized?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the main thing is to remember that I don't have all the answers. It is complicated what is happening right now. These are really historic times, really challenging times. And it's important not to carry a sense of hubris, but instead a sense of humility. I represent 9.2 million people. I will never meet all of them. And, that's something that I'm trying to grapple with and trying to understand in terms of, what role I can play. And hey, you want to say a quick hi? So my talking about young generation, right?
These guys look suspicious.
They look suspicious. Yeah. Say hi.
Hey, I'm gone.
Okay. Why
I'm
don't
out
you,
of the scene, guys.
okay, why don't you go to bed, okay, buddy? Can you go brush your teeth?
I'm out of the scene, Austin.
Can you go brush your teeth?
They can still hear me.
Okay,
but
here's
I'm
my
out
other
of the
one now. Okay, you want to say a quick hi? Okay.
Photo bomb.
Photo bomb.
It's
Yes,
not a
that's
photo.
exactly what you do. It's a
It's
video
not a
bomb.
It's not a photo.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, can you guys go brush your teeth and
Who
go to
are
bed?
these people? I just remember to get this. Who
Okay.
are those people?
I'm talking to them.
Who are they? Get out of here.
People I'm talking to. Students that I'm talking to. Okay.
Like what type of students?
Okay.
Like high school?
That's right.
All right.
Okay.
I don't care.
Okay. Good night. Say good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Okay.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. Good night.
Stop it. Don't stop it.
Okay. Well, so now you see my life. I don't know what's harder, navigating 99 other senators or two elementary school boys, but but I mean, look, to kind of draw off of that, you know, like I don't know what the right answer is to give my kids, to give you all, you know, the kind of future you deserve. Like things are complicated. The other thing that I'll say is that I also find that people are fed up with politicians just kind of acting like they know all the answers. You know, like I find that generally people are tired of people just like politicians showing up and be like, I have a 10-point plan to fix everything. And all you have to do is elect me and I'll fix it all. Like that's just not how it works. And like after so many years of just being kind of lied to in that way, I think like it just, you know, like I didn't realize I was being photographed when I was cleaning the Capitol. But now that I look back on it, I think that's why the photograph had some resonance, is like people lack a sense of authenticity in politics, like a sense of genuineness. Everything feels so staged, you know, everything, like I call it like performative governance. Like when I'm in Congress, like there's a lot of it that seems like theater, you know, like these hearings that I do. It just feels like a lot of what I see are colleagues of mine trying to have some viral video moment. So they'll, you know, they'll kind of talk in a certain way that no human normally talks like that. Like, and it's just like, it feels staged and feels, you know, so like, I just think that that's what causes so much distrust. Like we live in the time of the greatest amount of distrust in government in American modern history. So I just find that, you know, the average person I talk to, they know that things are complicated. They know that things are tough. There's not only one way to fix our healthcare. There's not only one way to try to address climate change or other things. So we should stop pretending like there is. And I hope people would find that kind of approach refreshing, because I'll be honest with you, I'm just like really tired of just the alternative where it just feels like I'm being lectured to by, you know, people who think they know better than me. And I think a lot of Americans feel like it feels like you're being talked down to. And as a result, it just feels like politics again is just like this elitist club with billionaires and people with fancy degrees kind of telling you what to do. And it just doesn't feel right. So I think that's generally kind of how I've come to understand things.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Kim. We just have one more question. What advice do you have for AANHPI students who are interested in careers in government, such as like diplomacy, intelligence, or defense, or a career in Congress? And what can youth-led organizations like us at the High School Democrats do to support your work?
Yeah. Well, first of all, like again, like you're like way ahead of the curve. You know, it's great that you're, you know, you're paying attention and engaging. I would say a couple things. One is like um really try to think through like what type of work satisfies you. You know, try to do internships. You know, try to volunteer for different types. It doesn't even have to be like politics directly or government directly. You know, like I volunteered at a hospital when I was in high school and other things. You learn from that just a sense of what what it means to work. And in particular, like what kind of work satisfies you to the point where at the end of the day, you're like, wow, like today was a good day. My life has just been trying to deduce that sense of satisfaction and that sense of what's a good day, and to try to have as many of those kinds of days as possible. Like, what kind of job would I have that I feel that feeling as much as I can? Because it's not always. Like when I worked at the State Department, I loved it. I loved being in diplomacy, but my day-to-day work was often very challenging or frankly really bureaucratic and frustrating at times. Like it's not easy. So I would just say like try different things out. Try to understand what type of work is there out there. Like I told you, like I'm not really a guy that engages in politics in sort of a natural way, but maybe some of you are. Maybe some of you want to do campaigns and like to do that type of work. That's great. And like you should try to volunteer on campaigns and get out and try to explore that. Others of you might be more interested in the policy side and doing different internships, different studies in that kind of vein can be helpful to understand what that means and what type of work you could kind of go towards. And I think ultimately that's important. But I will say is don't be afraid to take some risks. Don't be afraid to kind of try for things, even if you think it'll be hard. The one of the most important things I think I kind of embraced when I was younger is this idea that I should not self-select myself out of things. Like if I'm interested in something, what's the worst that could happen if I try for something? Whether that was like, like when I was younger, like there's part of me that was like, there's no way that I'd be qualified to do, to be able to win the Rhodes Scholarship or this or that. But then I said, like, well, why would I self-select myself out though? Like if it's something I'm interested in, like let someone else decide whether or not I'm qualified or not. I remember I was one of the earliest examples of this was a scholarship called the Truman Scholarship. It's a scholarship that tries to reward juniors in college who are interested in public service. And so I did that, and then I was, build up my confidence. And again, I applied for the Rhodes Scholarship. Again, thinking there's no way that I could probably win this thing, but I'm going to try. I remember I showed up for the finals. I got invited for the interview round, and I was going through the interviews and ultimately got selected. And I remember the person on the selection committee that was the one that informed me that I had won the Rhodes Scholarship was a young Newark City Councilman named Cory Booker, who I now get to serve alongside as a U.S. Senator. The two of us are senators together, and he selected me for the Rhodes Scholarship 21 years ago. It's just like, who would have thought that someone like him and someone like me, we're the only all minority Senate delegation in the nation. But it wouldn't have happened if either of us kind of gave in to some of our insecurities and said, you know what, maybe this won't work for me. So if there's something you're interested in doing, like try for it. Let someone else decide. Well, like the same thing with vote, like with the elections, right? Like when people are telling me there's no way that an Asian American can win a congressional district that voted for Trump, that an Asian American can win a statewide election in New Jersey. Well, it would have been easy for me to just not do it then and say, oh, it's going to be too hard. But if you actually give the voters a chance, let them decide what they want. If the voters said they didn't want me, like, so be it. But what I found actually is, if you have a compelling story and you try hard, they'll give you a look. They'll give you a chance. No guarantees, but what's the harm? So I would just say, make sure you're engaged out there. Try to think through what satisfies you. But the most important thing is just try and, just give it a shot. And I hope many of you do, and I hope we stay in touch about that. It's something that I feel very strongly about in terms of public service. We live in very difficult times, but I think that what's going to help pull us out of this tailspin that we're in as a country right now is by having a new generation of public servants step up to be able to kind of re-anchor ourselves towards this idea that we're part of something bigger than all of us. So I do hope you give it a look. It can be challenging. When I graduated grad school, I was offered six-figure salaries at some of the big tech companies, which is fine if that's what people want to do. But it was tough with that. Then joining up at the State Department at a $37,000 a year salary, and wondering whether or not that was something that could sustain me and build towards a career. So it's challenging, but if you really feel it and you are interested, I certainly would encourage it. It is a great honor to be able to serve this country. I think it is an honorable profession, and it's been the love of my life. I hope I can serve this country for the rest of my life. And I hope any of you give it a shot too.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Kim. What you said was really relatable to me, and I'm sure a bunch of other people here, because like you talked about like how you shouldn't let your insecurities get the best of you. And like actually a lot of times like I find myself wondering whether I'm good enough to do something. But yeah, like you said, yeah, like we should just go out there and do it and let other people decide whether like don't like let yourself tell yourself that you're not good enough. And yeah, with that, thank you so much for answering these questions. I'll pass it off to Anya, our policy director. She has a question for you, and thank you again.
Yeah.
Hi, Senator Kim. As Achitan introduced me, I'm the policy director for this caucus. And my question for you is that you've previously spoken out about anti-Asian hate and the need for stronger civil rights protections. So, are there any specific bills you have previously or are currently sponsoring to support or are supporting to address this issue?
Yeah, I mean, like, you're saying in terms of like some of the anti-Asian hate and the discrimination, you're saying, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like, look, I tried to push forward and we passed some legislation that was trying to have a greater level of awareness and understanding about hate crimes that are affecting and targeting Asian Americans. That is something that we push forward on because, like, I think some of the issue is like hate comes in many different forms. There's lots of similar roots, but it takes form in different ways, like whether it's anti-Semitism, anti-Arab, anti-Muslim, Islamophobia, or anti-Asian hate, or others. Like they have similarities, but there are certain nuances in how it's manifesting. So, we've been trying to do legislation that would create greater awareness, trainings to law enforcement, to others about some of the differences. So that's part of it. The other aspect of it is like I've been trying to push for a greater level of access that can help educate and inform Asian Americans and Asian American communities on how to report and when to report. What I found is a lot of Asian Americans that I talk to, when they encounter discrimination or hate, they often keep their mouths shut. They often don't talk about this. My parents included. Like they don't. My parents, like they are very quiet people. They don't want to make waves. They don't want to cause controversy. So if someone yells at them, they won't say anything back. They'll just kind of keep their head down, and they won't report it. But that's challenging because that it makes it hard for us to understand just how widespread some of this could be, and also a difference in terms of understanding, how to be able to stop it. So, that's sort of another angle that we try to see. And also the other aspect of it is like, this was something that I was experiencing. You saw my little kids. I remember one time my older son, he kind of came to me and he said that a bigger kid kept at school kept calling him Chinese boy over and over again. And it broke my heart to like hear that he's being taunted. And I heard that like in many ways his like first kind of sense of being Asian American in that way came from a place of difference, a place of humiliation. And so I've been trying to push legislation, for instance, to create a national, like a Smithsonian National Museum for Asian Pacific Americans, to try to like have a place where we can be proud of our own heritage, our own contributions to this country. Because I don't want our definition being Asian American to be in reaction to those that seek to perpetuate and pervade hate. I want us to have our own sense of what it is and to be proud of that. So yes, I'm doing things to push back on the hate and the discrimination to keep people safe, but I'm also trying to create a greater sense of what it means to be Asian American, not just for us, but for the rest of the country as well, to see our contributions and to see that, again, we are as American as anybody else. And I think that that's an important part of it too.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Oh, yes, Anya, go for it. Sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, Ankita just said in the chat that she'll call on people as they raise their hand, so I'll transition it towards Ankita.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Senator Andy Kim, for answering our questions so far. I would love to open it up to the audience here to ask what they would like to hear from you. First of all, I know Ty had our first question. He asked, Ty, would you like to ask it yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Hi there, Senator Kim. My name is Ty Tan. I'm a rising junior and aspiring foreign policy States Department sort of worker. That's what I plan to go into. So I thought your experience was really inspiring. Now, my question kind of ranges more toward the policy as more, I guess, Congress or senatorial side of things. I know Marco Rubio recently visited the Senate and was on the floor. And I know a lot of Democratic senators like mine from Nevada said that they were against voting him or like disapproved of how he's been treating American foreign policy as of late. I just wanted to ask, I know I'm not sure what you're allowed to say in terms of opinions on, I guess, members of the cabinet, but how well do you think so far that the Trump administration and Rubio himself have been treating American foreign policy? And do you think the shift toward isolationism in the current US foreign policy paradigm is a good one?
Yeah, I'm really disappointed deeply in Marco for how he's operated. He's somebody that when he was a senator, he talked about the importance of USAID. He talked about the importance of humanitarian assistance development, talked about how we need to have a robust foreign policy given all the challenges that we face. And just, for what appears to be the pursuit of power and his own ambitions to be president one day, he seems to have really betrayed a lot of that. And he has been the face of this neo-isolationism, which you were rightfully able to point out. That's what it is. There's an isolationism policy that is being enacted upon this idea that America first means America alone. And it is turning its backs on our allies and our partners. And it's so offensive, really is. Like, I worked on a NATO military base in Afghanistan. Like, I had soldiers from other countries protecting me and other Americans, like fighting and dying alongside us. And for us to turn our backs on so many of these allies, it's shameful. Marco knows better. But for the sake of chasing power, his own ambitions, he is willing to put all that on the line. And I find that to be disappointed. Doesn't even get at it. It's really it's sad. It's sad. These are difficult times. Um, and I think that that's why people lose trust, because they don't see this sense of integrity in those that are doing these jobs. So we deserve better leaders.
Thank you so much for your insight, Senator.
Thank you.
Yeah, and our second question comes from Shikha Sharma, who is also from Jersey, I think. Would love for him to ask you his question.
Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Shikhar Sharma. I'm from the First Gen Caucus, and I'm also a public high schooler here in New Jersey. I'm a sophomore. I'm from Middlesex County, which you might know has a large immigrant and Asian American community. So my question for today is that, considering the economic and environmental implications of outsourcing U.S. industry, especially as it relates to increasingly important industries such as manufacturing and renewable energy, and with concerns over Trump's drill baby drill policies, what are your thoughts and plans on reducing U.S. reliance on foreign labor and supply chains, especially on clean energy sectors such as the manufacturing of solar panels or windmills from foreign nations, such as China, who might not share US values on democracy? And I'm not against globalization. I greatly support it, actually, but I do think that US over reliance on foreign nations is a genuine concern. So, what steps can you take to ensure that the clean energy sector is not only promoted, but also saved for US soil?
Yeah. So I agree with a lot of what you're saying there. Over reliance is dangerous because it becomes a sense of dependence upon other countries. And we saw during the pandemic what happens if we're overly reliant upon other nations for critical products, healthcare products, medicines. Right now, there's a lot I'm trying to push forward on to make sure that we're not overly reliant on other countries when it comes to prescription drug precursor ingredients and other things like that. So I think that there is a sense that yes, we want to make sure that there's a capacity of manufacturing and advanced manufacturing in the United States. Legislation like the Chips and Science Act that I supported that are pushing forward strengthen our capacity for semiconductor manufacturing. There is a lot that we did through the Inflation Reduction Act, which was geared towards ensuring that we can have greater level of manufacturing when it comes to renewable energy. And that's good not just for our own climate goals, but it's also important in terms of our own economics, as whichever country is able to innovate and to compete globally when it comes to energy is going to be a massive part of what makes the United States economy strong going forward. Almost the entirety of our major gains when it comes to our economy over the last 20, 30 years has come from tech and energy. So that's important. I think we need to recognize we're not going to make everything, right? And I think that we should not, like, Trump is trying to push for this idea that we're going to make everything here in the United States. I don't think we need to be making I don't know, like keychains and all sorts of different things that we don't need to necessarily get to a place where everything is coming from here, but we can think through what makes sense, especially when it comes to our supply chain, especially when it comes to critical types of products and components. And that's what I hope we can kind of get towards. So I think that makes a lot of sense. It's a national security priority as well as just like a sense of our own economy. So I think that would make sense if we're able to do that.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Amazing. Thank you. I would love to pass it off to Chris.
All right, good evening, everybody. Good evening, Senator Kim. First of all, I want to say it is an incredible honor to speak with you. I am from New Jersey. I reside in Middlesex County. I'm from Edison, and as you know, I just in the last couple of months we've been hearing a lot about this so-called big beautiful bill proposed by the Trump administration. As you know, last night it passed in the passed in the House by a razor-thin margin. And what concerns me is that it cuts so much funding from Medicare and Medicaid, which so many Americans rely upon, and invests so much money into into the deportation program that the Trump administration is currently producing. It's from my understanding, it's slashed about $50 billion for Medicaid and Medicare, and instead going to these deportation programs and funding the border wall. And as a first generation Mexican American, this concerns me because this deportation program seems to be the um a complete almost acceptance of xenophobia and hatred towards many, like specifically Latino Americans, and deportating legal citizens that are residing here in the U.S. As I'm sure you heard with that incident in the citizen in El Salvador in Maryland that was deported to El Salvador, that which the Trump administration refuses to return. And my question to you is, what are you planning to do to oppose this legislation with the pass and protect Medicare and Medicaid while also defending the rights of Latino Americans who are legal citizens of the United States?
Yeah, a couple different angles, which is, first and foremost, we are doing everything we can in the U.S. Senate to try to oppose this legislation. It's coming to us after it passed through the House of Representatives. So, I have been reaching out and engaging with my Republican colleagues, especially a couple of them that I think recognize the damages and dangers. We're talking about 14 million Americans that would very well likely lose their health care. This is the single largest healthcare budget cut in American history if it gets passed through. The number is $700 billion of cuts for Medicaid, $300 billion of cuts for the Affordable Care Act. So that would be literally $1 trillion of cuts to our healthcare. We're also talking about massive cuts to SNAP benefits. We're also looking at potentially massive cuts, millions of students that will either see their Pell Grants eliminated or reduced. This is something that, again, as you said, some of it will be directed towards an effort for mass deportation. Some of it will also be, much of it will be geared towards, over $4 trillion in tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. So, I'm trying to work that in terms of at least trying to address that in terms of my colleagues in the Senate. I look back on 2017 at a moment where Senator John McCain was instrumental in saving the Affordable Care Act at that time, and trying to see whether or not we can come up with a similar type moment. It'll be challenging, but it's important to try. I've been also doing town halls all across New Jersey, especially in Republican-dominated, more conservative areas of New Jersey. I'm also trying to mobilize people in the disability community, seniors, as well as families with young kids that are relying upon Medicaid. 1 out of every 3 kids in New Jersey gets their health care through Medicaid. 2 million out of 9 million people in New Jersey get their health care through Medicaid. And it's not just the people on Medicaid. Hospital leaders are telling me that if Medicaid is cut in a substantial way, their hospitals could very well close because of just the sheer amount of their work being done through Medicaid. So this could be deeply damaging. And as you said, in terms of how it's kind of contributing to this effort by the Trump administration, a number of different fronts that we're pushing on that. The judicial fight is a big part of it. I've also been, going and inspecting some of the ICE detention facilities in New Jersey and trying to address some of the needs of my constituents that are being held there. Trying to, make sure that they have the legal representation and the different understanding of what their rights are. I'm fighting back against the different efforts to try to eliminate temporary protected status, TPS, for different communities in New Jersey. We have very large communities of Haitians, of Venezuelans, and others that are seeing their TPS being eliminated, and try to address it. I can't stop it all, and then that's been tough to see. But I think it's important for the American people to understand that the Trump administration keeps trying to sell this lie that they are going after violent criminals and people that are there to hurt us. No, the kind of people that they're going after are people like this guy named Kareem Daoud, who's from Hunterdon County, New Jersey. He's been here 21 years. He's got an American citizen wife. He's got 2 American citizen kids, yet he is being detained and is on the cusp of being deported. Uh, when I engage ICE about him, they confirm to me he has no criminal background, no criminal history. He's being singled out and being targeted in that way. And those are the stories that the American people need to hear. I very much still believe, and I see it in the polling and surveys, the American people, they recognize that, that there is nuance here, that people that have been here a long time, especially have family here, like things are different. So that's what we need to shine a light on, make sure people understand those stories, that they know the people and they don't just give in to the lies that are being fed to them by the Trump administration. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much for your time, Senator Kim.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Unfortunately, Senator Kim, I don't know how long more you can stay, but I can see that we have, I think, 4 more questions.
Yeah,
3 more
maybe
questions.
if we could just kind of go through the 3 and then I'll answer them together. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sure. So Sunroop, then Liam, then Zachariah, you can ask your questions and we can see how we can put them together, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, mine's a pretty general question. I think it kind of relates to. Oh, sorry, I did.
No, you're so good. Go for it.
No,
Go for it.
Hi, Senator Kim. Sorry, I'm Ken Roop. I'm from Washington State. I just wanted to get into the question really fast. So it's kind of general about foreign policy, sort of connecting to what Ty said earlier, because you mentioned your, your early commitment to national security and diplomacy in your career. So with the immigration-related actions, especially targeting free speech, that our current administration has taken under the guise of national security and America first, and also how they've handled foreign affairs, like how Trump and Vance handled their meeting with the Ukrainian president in February. My question to you is, how do you feel we kind of restore our position among other world leaders, among the world in general, and how does our country sort of come back from that and find redemption?
Great question. Liam?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'm Liam. I live in Minnesota. And with the big, beautiful bill just passing the House by 1 vote, it kind of brings up the unfortunate death of Jerry Connolly. He beat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for the ranking member seat in the Oversight Committee. And overall, I think it kind of encapsulates the energy of anger at the Democratic Party for not being willing to move on to younger people and younger members in the House. Do you think this energy is felt by Senate Democrats too? Do they understand it, or do you think it's something that's lacking?
Yeah, thanks for that. Another question there?
There was from
Zachariah?
Yes, sorry for the delay. So the Lancet Medical Journal recently published this report saying that the overall death toll in Gaza could currently exceed 180,000 Palestinians. And in the past few days, France, the UK, and a few other American allies have all promised to take decisive action against Israel if it doesn't halt its genocide in Gaza. So as Netanyahu's government continues to grow more and more extreme and is working with Trump to collaborate on displacing Gazans, how do you think the U.S. should respond?
Yeah, good questions. Maybe I'll start. Maybe I'll work backwards there. This this conflict that we're seeing, the violence that we're seeing right now, in particular, what I've been really struck by is just just the brutality that's coming from this blockade of humanitarian assistance that is there. It's wrong, and it's something that I've said directly to Netanyahu, and it is, even for folks that are supporters of Israel, I think it's important for them to see that it is wrong, it is inhumane, and honestly, it doesn't serve their purposes when it comes to security. When we see just this continued barrage of violence in February, I I I urged Netanyahu to continue with the ceasefire, continue with the diplomacy, and shortly thereafter saw him instead, start this blockade in early March, and then resume the violence. And it just, it's very clear that he just doesn't have the priorities of trying to um, actually bring this to a close and to try to come up with a way that's going to actually create any sort of meaningful, durable peace. So it's challenging on that front. I'm continuing to try to press and build a coalition and engage with some of these other countries to be able to engage. I supported alongside some of my Senate colleagues an effort to restrict weapons systems to Israel, and try to find other ways to be able to show our opposition to what Netanyahu is doing. And frankly, I will say, and having seen this out in Israel myself, there's opposition strongly within Israel too to what Netanyahu is doing, and I think that doesn't always come across. I mean, over 70% of Israelis polled oppose how Netanyahu's handling this all. And I think it's important for the United States to be able to stand up and take action to be able to address them. So, and I think that that's in particular part of the pressure that's being done. And you see that with, I mean, as much as I criticize, Marco Rubio, he has been starting to speak out against the humanitarian blockade and other actions. And I think, continuing to try to push and to try to create that sense of urgency is important. So, thank you for raising it. And I think right now there is a growing sense of international condemnation, a recognition of just how wrong it is on the blockade and the need for a sense of diplomacy now more than ever to be able to end this and have that sense of a durable peace. I'm engaging with a number of the Arab nations to try to see if there is a growing coalition that can be put there that can help try to clarify and engage in terms of what would happen next. How do we ensure that what happens next is not what Netanyahu says in terms of, him saying the other day that he wants to have the IDF basically have a long-term occupation over Gaza, something that would be catastrophic in terms of, how that would unfold. So, those are the types of things that, we need to continue to push on. I think maybe I'll go to the first question because I think that they're somewhat related in terms of foreign policy and how do we restore our place when it comes to foreign policy. I think that that's something that is going to be very difficult. And there's no guarantees that we get there. And I think that that's part of what's so scary is that there's a real sense of American decline that we could be on the cusp of here. A real sense that like we may not recover from what's happening right now in the way that we hope we could. I think in the first Trump term, a lot of people, both inside the United States and outside the United States, were kind of thinking maybe this is a fluke, and we can kind of get through these 4 years. But I don't think that people feel the same about that anymore. Even if the election flips the other way in 2028, a lot of leaders in other countries, a lot of populations in other countries are going to feel like, yeah, but like it could go back, it could go back the way it did, just like it did in 2024. Like they don't trust us anymore. And I think this is going to do some real long-term damage. I think there's inevitably long-term damage being done to the transatlantic alliance, to other aspects. I mean, NATO is going to be in really dire shape for some time, and we see these types of actions that are frankly emboldening our enemies and our adversaries and our competitors. So it's very alarming to see how that all unfolds. I don't know how we try to move on with regards to what's next for USAID. It's been literally broken down and basically eliminated. How do we try to rebuild that sense of humanitarian assistance, development aid? Like, how do we do that? And like, I've been engaged in some conversations about that with others about what we would try to restore. We don't know yet. I don't think the answer is to do it exactly how we've done it before. I don't think the answer is to come in and immediately, put back USAID exactly as it is or as it was. Or we need to kind of think through, what would make sense and what would be sustainable, and what would we do to make sure that it can't just be wiped away again whenever some next Republican comes into, the presidency. So that sense of reliability is gone now. Like America is no longer seen as a reliable partner, a reliable ally, a reliable country. And that's going to have really devastating impacts on us, not just in terms of military and diplomacy, but also economic. If companies are thinking about investing in the United States, why would they do so if they think we are unreliable, unpredictable? So that's a challenge. When it comes to this question about the next generation for the Democrats and just in politics at large, yeah, I think it was Liam. I think you were asking this question. I think people are grappling with it. You saw that directly stated in some of the retirement announcements by some of my colleagues in the Senate, Dick Durbin, Jeanne Shaheen. They specifically referred to them not running again as a means of, passing the torch, this sense of next generation. But you don't see it everywhere. And it is frustrating. Just, kind of in general. And I don't know how we kind of grapple with this more broadly. Like I'm not opposed to like term limit ideas or things of that nature. I've been pretty forward leaning in terms of different types of reforms that we can do in government. I've supported term limits on the Supreme Court, and I've like 18-year is what I was thinking. Is what a number of us are coalescing around. I'm not opposed to 18 years being something as well for the House and the Senate. It's something that we've kind of thought through. But it's just it's a challenge writ large that I think we need to engage in. And the next generation, it's not just about age. I think it's about trying to think through what is that perspective that is broad, what is the value that can be had, as well as the capacity to be able to connect with voters, with people. I mean, you saw my little kids. Like, I think it's important to have the voice of young parents in the U.S. Senate. People that can talk directly to the anxieties that parents and young families are facing right now. To as we have debates about education, Department of Education, like the fact that I got 2 elementary school kids, like allows me to engage with that and speak with a level of earnestness with that others might not be able to. That can be powerful and that can be helpful to the party to try to make those types of arguments. So it's challenging on that front. Like I told you, I'm not somebody that came from politics. I'm not somebody that like came up through the Democratic Party. In fact, in New Jersey, for those of you who are in New Jersey, running for Senate meant I actually had to run against my party in New Jersey during the primary, as the Democratic Party here has its own problems when it comes to machine politics and corruption, as demonstrated by my predecessor who got indicted and convicted for bribery and corruption. Like, we have real problems. And I am somebody that, I run as a Democrat and I engage there, but I think it's important to keep a healthy skepticism as well, and to recognize that you can't always assume that the party's going to make the right choices. As well as in terms of some of my colleagues, yes, I do think we're hopefully going to see a real generational shift happening over the next 2 to 4 years. And I think that that's something people are grappling with now more than ever. So I'm hopeful that we can learn those lessons. So, but look, I probably got to run now. I think I got to tuck the kids into bed. But I'm grateful that we had a chance to be able to touch base and have a really. I hope this was a helpful conversation. I've tried to be very honest with my answers, and I just am very grateful that all of you are paying attention and that you're thinking about how it is you might be able to get engaged. As I sort of said, I really encourage you to try and find your way. And again, that doesn't mean that all of you are going to do politics or government full time. But even still, there are ways in which you can serve, ways in which you can participate, and ways you can try to encourage and urge others to be able to pay attention to. The level of disinformation and divisiveness that we face is real, and it's growing, and it's so incredibly dangerous. It really requires a lot of us to be able to make sure that we're doing everything we can to kind of cut through the noise, to make sure that we're informed in the right way. And I struggle with this as a senator in terms of just making sure I get the right information, accurate information. So, I know it's difficult for all of us, but I'm grateful that you're taking the time to be able to engage, and I urge you to keep up with it. So thanks again for letting me be a part of your discussion. Thank you.
Before you go, though,
Thank you so
I
much.
would
We
love
really appreciate it.
Virginia to take on. I'm so sorry. Yes.
Yeah, no, of course. So, I just want to be really cognizant of everyone's time. I know it's a little bit late for our East Coast friends, but as we bring the first day of our AANHPI Summit to a close, I want to take a moment to reflect on the powerful conversations we've had and recognize how, in such great times of divisiveness, we've come here to find community tonight. And on behalf of the caucus, I want to express my deepest gratitude to our keynote speaker, Senator Kim, for his inspirational, motivating words. We so appreciate the time you took out of your incredibly busy day to come speak with us, and we've enjoyed this dialogue so much. And as we all look ahead to tomorrow's sessions, I'm carrying forward so much of the energy we all brought tonight, and I invite you all to join Ankita and I again to explore AANHPI history, celebrate the rich culture and diversity present in our communities, as well as confront head-on some of the most critical challenges our diaspora faces. Thank you for coming out tonight, and just before we all jump off the Zoom, I'd love if everyone could turn our cameras on so we could take a quick screenshot for our newsletters and our socials. I'll give everyone a few minutes to do that. Ankita, do you want to take the screenshot?
I don't think my camera works right now. Can anyone else?
I can take the screenshot.
Okay, perfect.
Perfect.
Okay, so is everyone ready? Okay. 3, 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much, guys.
Have a good night. I appreciate your time so much. It's been an honor.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you so much, Senator Kim.